Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for everyone here on the Zoom. Thank you for joining us on the LinkedIn Live. My name is Gershon Margolis. I am the founder of Imperial Advisory. We are a fractional CFO firm. So we've got a team of experienced CFOs and other financial professionals, and we go into businesses that don't have a CFO and need help, but sometimes we go into businesses that do have a CFO. And then we end up working for the CFO. We pick up typically where accounting leaves off, and we help give business owners and CFOs, and whoever else we're working for, insights and information so they can make better, more informed decisions. We get involved in many aspects of business because the people on our team have a lot of great experience. And we're certainly not HR people, but once in a while we touch on HR, and then we eventually call them the real HR people. But as business executives, we get pulled into all sorts of things. And one of the things that we get pulled into is mergers and acquisitions. We have several people on our team who have a lot of that experience. And obviously there's a lot of financial work involved in that. And yeah, we get involved in that both at our CFO clients, and sometimes we get brought in just as consultants on that to just help with a deal where we might get hired by a CFO or by a company that doesn't need a CFO, or sometimes even by private investors who are looking to make an acquisition. Yeah, so given that context, well, first, let me actually welcome. We have, I see my partner Ken here, so welcome, Ken. Ken has tons of M&A experience. And also some other people from our team, but I don't see faces, so I can't welcome you individually. But now segueing back into the intro. So we do a fair amount of M&A work, and for that reason, we thought it would be a great idea to have Christine join us today. Christine runs the corporate practice at a large law firm here on Long Island, I think mostly on Long Island, but she'll tell us, I guess, Campola, Middleton, and McCormick. And I've heard her speak before, and from my recollection is that she had a lot of really good stories, very entertaining, and obviously has a lot of great knowledge on the topic. So without further ado, I'm gonna, oh, and the topic, of course, is retaining employees while exploring a transaction. So if you lose your people, that's not great. Often the value in the business is the people. Sometimes there's other value, but people are definitely a big part of the value. So anyway, without further ado, Christine, welcome. Please augment my introduction if you'd like, and then take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Gershon. Thank you, Imperial Advisory, for letting me be here this morning to speak to everybody. It's a very important topic, and I'm hoping to have some back and forth. So if anyone has questions or comments, please put them in the chat, and we'll answer them as we go along, if possible. If not, at the end. Just a little bit more about me. I'm a partner at Campola, Middleton, McCormick, LLP. We are in a full-service law firm located. Our headquarters are in Ronkonkoma, New York, right at the Islip Airport. But we also have offices in Riverhead and Westbury. We do transactional work. My department does transactional work for businesses and business people everywhere in New York State. We even have clients that are in New York State, but they do transactions outside of the state, across the country, or even overseas, and we help them with that as well. We do everything here from helping someone start a company, to raise money, to investment docs, to employee issues, to buying or selling of a company. There's so many deals that we've been involved in. It's on both buy side and sell side, and we can definitely help any business. We've done, types of businesses, everything from manufacturing to doctor's offices to other professional services companies, and we work directly and strategically with clients. So it's important that strategy-wise, you can't just sell your company. You don't wake up one day and say, I'm selling my company. Okay, who am I selling it to? There's a whole lot that goes into selling or buying a company. And we always say best case scenario is to get us involved immediately so that we can help you strategize best way. Today, we are going to be talking about one strategy that's necessary with respect to employees, but there are many other facets of a transaction that need to be discussed earlier, the better. We also do, in the context of business, everything. My background I started out as a trial attorney, which is always good for negotiation purposes, because for 15 years I was a trial attorney, and my specialty was insurance coverage litigation. And I always tell the silly story, you're not going to have many transactional lawyers that actually got booed answering calendar call in Supreme Court, New York County, when they answered for Allstate Insurance Company. People don't like insurance companies. So the good part about that is that having the litigation background is always great, but I've been doing this for 15 years. So it's not that this is new to me. And we have more of a diverse background. We can help you with more. It's not just one thing. We do it from the business side as well as the actual attorney side. And so I have a PowerPoint, because everyone likes PowerPoints. If my email address is right here, cmalafi@cmmllp.com. If you want a copy of the PowerPoint, just email me and I'm more than happy to send it to you.
And also, Brittany will be sending out the presentation after.
Okay, good.
And if anyone needs that, get it from her as well.
Good. And if anyone has any questions after that aren't answered during the presentation, you can email me. More than happy to help. Okay, a little bit about me. We already did this part. Okay, so sorry, just getting sure I'm getting all these things. Okay, so starting out just generally, when you sell your business, you are going to have two jobs for a while. The job of selling your business and the job of running your business. Most people, when they're selling their business, realize that it is so time consuming just to sell your business, and that it is a big burden to keep your business running at the same time you're trying to sell. So before you decide to sell your business, you really have to plan strategically how you're going to handle the sale and resolve all the issues that come up on a literally hourly basis as you're selling your company. So one of the most important items to deal with immediately upon deciding to sell your company is, when are you going to inform employees, and which employees are you going to inform that you're selling? You have to think about everything that you're going to need in selling your business at the same time while running your business, so that you can formulate the right strategy to best ensure that you're going to keep the employees that you need, not only during the sale, but potentially after the sale. As Gershon said, CFO and your financial people are so important during a sale. And if your CFO is going to leave the company a month before you close on a transaction, that's not good. You need certain people there with you during the sale, and then certain people probably to be present after the sale. There's no one size fits all. No one size fits all. No one can tell you, oh yes, this is what you must do, without hearing any of the facts or hearing anything about your business. Because your employees have value not only to you, but to your buyer in most cases. And it's very hard to decide how and when you're going to disseminate information about your sale to employees. And you, as the owner of a business, have the ability to make sure that the business continues operating efficiently, and retaining your key employees is important to that. So you have to make these decisions, but consulting with a lawyer and with your other sale professionals can really help.
Question. Is this a major concern, people walking out, if the owner is legitimately staying on? So if you're selling the company and it's not being absorbed, but you're now becoming, like, I'll tell you, we have someone I was speaking to recently who was telling me that, he's intending to sell his business, and he's going to be the general manager of this new business, of this new subsidiary of whomever. Is he at risk of people walking out the door? Is there any more than, and he is any other day of the week?
Right. So it depends, right? It depends on who your buyer is. It depends on how you told your employees. Usually, when you sell your business, I would say 9.9% of the time, the buyer wants you to stay on, the owner to stay on for some period of time. A lot of that way it helps with a smooth transition. A lot of times the amount of that time is negotiated. Some people who are selling their business don't want to stay on for a long period of time. Some people say, I'll work for the rest of my life without having to worry about the hassles that come with actually owning the business. I want to work, go home. So it
Right.
depends. It is always better if the owner is staying on to retain the employees, because it can be posed to employees that listen, we're changing ownership, but nothing else is changing. Or we're changing ownership, but everything's going to stay the same, except that now you can have these added benefits, right? There's always something that when you're selling your company, especially I'm assuming from what you're saying, it's probably private equity buying. They're going to keep a subsidiary, run the business, and then try to merge it into something else for cost saving purposes. So it really depends on what the end goal for the buyer is, as well as the sellers. But yes, it is usually definitely more conducive to retaining employees if the owner is staying on board for some period of time. Yes. And that's something that before you decide how and when to tell your employees about the sale, you as the business owner have to know pretty much, am I staying on? If so, for how long? Or am I not staying on? Because that is going to make a difference. So as we're talking, it's clear there's two approaches. And what you really have to think about is, when are you telling employees, before or after the sale, right? That's number one. Number two is assessing the risks on both sides. And most of the time you're going to be blended. Some people are going to tell before the sale, some people are going to tell after the sale. But remember, you're making these decisions and thinking about them first with your own advisors, attorneys, financial advisors, broker, if you're using a business broker. But you also, at some point before you make your final decision, you're going to have to speak with the buyer to see what the buyer wants. And we'll get into that a little bit more. There's risks and benefits to telling employees before or after sale. What are the theories? Like, what are you thinking about? A lot of times I represent business owners who have literally put their life into their business. I just finished the transaction earlier this year where the couple that owned the business had put 60 something years into their business, and their 50 employees were like family to them. And part of their thought process was, we don't think we need to tell most of the employees until the sale takes place, but we want them taken care of. We are not selling to someone who tells us that they are not going to keep everyone on and that they're going to fire people. So you have to make decisions. And they wrestled a lot with being transparent. They didn't want their employees to find out at the last minute, because most of them had been there, believe it or not. It was a company on Long Island, and most of their employees had been there for 15 years or more. And they were a manufacturing business. So part of when you get involved, you're thinking about, okay, what's the size of your business? How many employees do you have? The larger your staff, the less you want to tell everybody, because it's more chance that that the confidential information that you're selling the business might be put out to the public. But at the same time, that there's certain employees that you are going to have to tell at some point before the sale takes place. So while you're thinking about being transparent, what you want to do is look to see, which of my employees do I have a non-disclosure agreement with? Which employees have already signed on that my business information is confidential and they are not going to disclose it to anyone else? Because you will always, in selling a company, have a non-disclosure agreement with your potential buyer. So it's very important that you don't breach that non-disclosure agreement. Your buyer doesn't want to get it out that they might be buying the company either. So you have to be very careful. Who might you want to tell? Who do you need to tell to bring into the deal? And do I already have a non-disclosure in place with them? If you don't, you're going to want to set yourself up with non-disclosure agreements in place with your key employees, which can be posed to them at any point in time. Your high-ranking employees, the ones that help you with your business decisions and financial decisions, are not surprised if you ask them for a non-disclosure agreement. You don't have to explain why. They will understand. When you have smaller companies, it's more difficult. How do I make a decision? I can't just say, okay, only my top people maybe, because some companies might only have 5 employees and they all sit in the same office. So, you're thinking, okay, well, I have 5 employees and I'm going to have 2 people in the same offices knowing and the other 3 not. So you really want to, make your decision. It's very particular to your company. Telling the key employees is important because you want to have them have an early awareness of it, make them feel like they're part of the process, make them start preparing themselves for any changes that might occur. You might want to tell certain employees, key employees, or maybe a little bit further out because you want them to trust you and you want them to be a part of the process. You also have to discuss with the buyer. Sometimes the buyer will tell you, we don't want to meet with any of your employees before we close. So then it really is your decision. Sometimes buyers will tell you at some point during due diligence, we are going to want to meet with the head of human resources. We're going to want to meet with the head of your manufacturing operations. We're going to want to meet with your supply chain coordinator. So you do want to discuss with the buyer when you have a buyer selected. Sometimes making the buyers comfortable with your employees can actually increase the value of your business. So in today's economy, in the past couple of years, we've seen that buyers of any manufacturing operations want to make sure that they retain all the employees, and they don't want employees told too soon because they don't want to, and we'll talk in a few minutes, have employees leaving the business before the sale. So you really want to engage your buyer as well. At the same time, part of your difficult decision is, well, if I tell my CFO, can I be sure that that person is not going to accidentally leak it out to anyone? Because we don't want employees finding out that you're selling your business from someone other than you. So you just, like I said, I keep repeating it, but you just want, it's very particular to you, and there's really no absolutely wrong answers. Everything can be fit to make you most comfortable.
Christine, question.
Yes.
See, I told you I might insert questions. These days, and we may still discuss this, but sometimes you have an earnout of some sort, right? When you sell a business, you say, okay, well, we need you to either transfer these relationships or retain these relationships, et cetera, et cetera. And I think I've seen that with professional services companies, especially. Is there a concept of an earnout, but based on not on relationships with customers, but based on the producers? So like if you're an owner and you're selling a manufacturing company with 50 employees and half of them walk out the door, so the company, you might have lots of customers, but we have an output problem. So could you tell it, have you ever seen a transaction where some of the price was based on, if you keep your people, then the company is that much more valuable and therefore you'll get paid more. And if your people walk out the door, then the value walks out the door and then you don't get paid, or you get paid less or something.
Absolutely. So earnouts are for those of you who may, just put it in context, you decide to sell your business, you come up with a purchase price. Sometimes you want more than the buyer is willing to pay. So what you do is you work out with the buyer, okay, you can pay me X amount at closing, but if my business does as well as I think it's going to do for X amount of years after closing, I want to make more money. So you come up with dollar amounts. If the company after sale makes more than, I'm just going to throw out a number, $1 million, I would get an extra $10,000. If in year 2 it makes $2 million, I would get an extra $20,000. Usually the numbers are way bigger than that, but just for sake of conversation. So yes, and it depends. So that's what an earnout is. So when you have an earnout, that's more incentive for you as the seller to want to ensure that your employees stay in place, right? Because you know that with your business, your employees can get the job done, right? And you also want to have people who are friendly to you still at the company so that everyone feels loyal to you. So when they're working, they know that they're doing their job, they're getting paid, and they're helping you out. There are a lot of ways to make that happen, and we're going to talk about them in a few minutes. Those would be stay bonuses and retention bonuses that we're going to talk about that you would offer to your staying employees. But yes, so if you have an earnout, that's more incentive for you to have your employees stay. And I think that answers the question. Is that answering your question, Gershon?
Well, when I've heard of it, and maybe I have less experience than you and some others on a lot of others on this call, but when I've heard of it, I always thought it to be around revenue. Maybe that's because I'm thinking of professional services. So
Right, it's
my
definitely based
question is,
on revenue. It's definitely based on revenue. And it does depend. Manufacturing is not going to have as much of an earnout as professional services. So for professional services, usually the buyer will come in and say, these are the key employees I need to stay for at least X amount of time after I purchase. So I just did an accounting firm that sold. And in the purchase agreement, we agreed to talk to 2 of the accountants and have them agree to stay on with the buyer for 2 years. So yes, it is very important, and there is a price to be paid for that. So in that negotiation, there's more. Okay, I'll get them to stay with you for 2 years, but you have to pay some of what I have to give them as a bonus to stay on.
right?
And that's all part of talking to your buyer and finding out what's going on. So yes, it does. But that is one of the things that definitely varies industry to industry. So, and we'll talk about that in a few more in a few minutes.
Thank you.
So into that as well, part of your decision is deciding when are you going to tell people, right? You're going to work with your buyer. So you have to time it so that you're managing expectations and you're addressing concerns. Usually there will be a tier. You're going to tell your key employees, your CFO, your general managers, the people who help you literally that you can't live without in your business. Those are going to be your employees that you're going to want to tell sooner. Then what do you do? How do you tell the rest of your employees? There's all different ways that you can do it. It's very rare that that the employees do not know until after the sale. Usually you will work out with the buyer that either the day or 2 before the sale is finalized, there'll be a joint meeting, the buyer with the seller, so that everyone is told at the same time. There's not enough time for everyone to panic before the sale, right? So they still have to be there because tomorrow we're closing, or 2 days from now we're closing. And here's the person from HR from the buyer who is here to give you all the forms you need to fill out, to transfer your ownership. Oh, and look, we don't have a 401k. They have a 401k. We have this health insurance, but they have this health insurance. We do X, they do Y, all good things. You're going to phrase it all in terms of the benefits to the employees as well for changing. Usually when that type of a tiered approach happens, it's usually in sort of the manufacturing aspect. So the people who are actually on the line, the heart and soul of operations, right? We know from experience that those people get very nervous if they find out about a sale. They're afraid they're going to lose their jobs. They're afraid working conditions are going to change, and they might leave very easily, especially in today's market, because the manufacturing field is always looking for people. Every business is looking for people to help them right now. So you're going to time it the day before the closing, probably. Now, remember, when you're selling your business, from when you decide to sell your business to when you find a buyer, and then from when you find a buyer to when you close, might be 3 months, sometimes depending on the complexity of the deal, 6 months. So you do have some time in there where you have to be very careful in the fact that you're not telling your employees, because you don't want them to find out surreptitiously and cause a panic. So it's balancing everything. And then you're going to want to have a team meeting where you're going to answer their questions, where you're going to put them at ease, where you might discuss, like I said, the positive aspects of the sale, where we always suggest somebody from the buyer should be there so they can see a face smiling at them. So they can hear somebody from the buyer's side telling them how wonderful it's going to be. When you're in business, your employees really are important to you. So you do want to understand at the outset that it is important to make all your employees comfortable. So that's part of the process. You know, if you wait until the day of the closing so they can't leave, while you're benefiting because it avoids the uncertainty. Are my employees going to stay if I tell them I'm selling, or are they going to leave? It prevents them from being too nervous at you as opposed to the buyer, because they don't have time to be nervous at you because you're already sold by the time you're telling them. So it's just, you have to also think about, when you're thinking about it, it's not just about your employees. If your employees are the people dealing with your vendors or your customers, you want to know that your employees are portraying the right message to your vendors and customers afterwards. So it is important that you think about every aspect of your business and how your employees can affect your business going forward when you're making the decision. So no matter how you choose to do this, it's very important that you understand that it's not just about you telling the employees. You really want your top people to be able to help you calm employees down, answer questions that employees may not want to ask you. They might want to ask a manager instead of asking you. You want to make sure that your top employees feel that everything's going to be in good hands and that this is beneficial to everyone. You also, in making these decisions, you want to acknowledge the contributions of your key individuals so that everyone understands how important they are. So I've had different deals where the owner of a company sets it up so that their CFO, their manager, their HR person all have, and we're going to talk about in a minute, bonuses that are tied to the sale of the company. As a reward for these people, my company wouldn't be worth $100 million if you didn't help me build it up to this point. And you've been a loyal employee, so I'm going to give you $100,000 when we close the sale, as long as you help me, you keep it confidential, and all the employees stay. That incentivizes your key employees. When you have certain businesses, it may be like sales. So sometimes for professional services is very important. You want those people to stay. Manufacturing as well. You might want to, when you break the news to everyone, be able to say, listen, I couldn't have done it without you. And for all of you, there will be a bonus issued to you at closing. And the manager is going to talk to you about what your bonus would be. You might want to do a tiered bonus. So you have your highest level people getting, and I'm just throwing out numbers, $100,000 each on a sale. And then as you go down the line, $500, $5,000, $10,000, so that everyone feels like you have valued them in the business. And a lot of those bonuses, you definitely, even when you're deciding what you want to give everyone, you have to come up with a schedule and you have to talk to your buyer so the buyer okays what you're doing. For a few reasons. You want to encourage everyone to stay. You want to make everyone feel appreciated. The buyer wants you to encourage everyone to stay as well, but the buyer is going to be hesitant if your bonuses are too high. They're going to say, no, you can't give we don't want you to give these people that much money, because then they might quit. They might say, okay, I have this much money, I'm taking a vacation, and then I'll find another job. So you do have to work it out with them. I just had a deal where the seller was giving their CFO $1 million of the purchase price, and the buyer said, absolutely not. Do not do that, because we need her to stay on board for at least a couple of years. And the buyer was insistent. The seller was insistent. She has worked so hard. This company would not be what it is without her. She not only is the CFO, but she manages, and she's wonderful, and we relied on her for so long. We want to give her $1 million. So we worked it out where the buyer wound up giving the $1 million out of purchase price, but over the course of the next 2 years. So it is important that while you make your key employees feel as appreciated as they should be, and all the way down. Like I had another client a couple of years ago who sold, it was a manufacturing company. And when they told the employees that they were selling, they had in their hand, it was the day before closing, they had in their hand checks for each and every one of them. And they handed out, $1,000 checks to each of the people who have worked the line for them for how many years. They did it by seniority. So they said for each year of employment, we're giving you each, I don't remember the number, $500. So them in their head, they all could calculate immediately how much their check was for. And they handed the checks out the night before closing. They were all very excited the next day when they came to work with the new owner of the company. They were incentivized. They were, they met the people all at the same time. Everyone agreed, and it comes off very well. So you don't have to be overcomplicated, but you do have to think about all these things because you know that your employees really are the key to everything that you do, right? Let's see. So what do employees want to hear? Bonuses are great, but that's, not the first thing they're going to think about, right? They want to hear that they're going to be secure. Their jobs are secure. Their families are secure. Their income is secure after after the company is sold. They want to know that they are going to meet someone from the new owner, right? They don't want it just to be like Charlie's Angels. It's Charlie on the phone and nobody ever sees him, They want to know that it's going to be a smooth transition, and they want to be comfortable with whoever they're going to have to work with, right? So that's what you need to think about when you're making your announcement, no matter when it is. You want every employee wants to feel this way. Doesn't matter if it's key employee or the lowest level of your organizational chart. Everyone wants to know the same thing. So this is what we talked about. There are numerous benefit packages you can make for your clients. I just had a client who said, in the next 5 or 6 years, I'm going to sell my business. When our earnings get up to 90 million, we're going to sell. I'm going to start to sell. But in order to get to my 90 million, I have 3 employees that have been with me since I was working out of my garage. And I want them to stay on and know they are so important to me that I want them to help me get to that number so we can sell. So we have done stay bonus agreements. He's not even looking to sell his company yet. He knows he's at least 3 years out from selling his company. We put in effect stay bonus agreements where these employees know that if they stay on until he sells, they're each getting 1% of the sales price. And he wanted to make sure, because it's he estimates between 3 and 6 years down the road is when he's going to be selling. He estimates that he's going to get almost to his mark within the next 2 years. So what we did is we even built into the stay bonus that once the gross revenue, gross sales of the company gets to a certain point, these 3 employees can choose to take out $250,000 of the ultimate sale bonus that they'll get at a point in 3 years. And then that is non-refundable. So if they take that and then quit, they wouldn't get the rest of the money. So he's incentivizing them 2 ways. One, to try to get to that sales mark sooner so they can take out $250,000. And B, that's not what he estimates to sell for. The 1% is worth way more than that. So he is anticipating that everyone's going to be working harder now to get to that point so they can take part of their sale bonus, and then they're going to work even harder to get the rest of the sale bonus. So your employees, it's going to incentivize them. The sooner you start thinking about this, the better. So usually stay bonuses are paid to company employees until it's an agreement you put in place in writing so that they know it's there, and that they get paid in the future when the deal closes, right? So sometimes there'll be a stay and retention bonus, and they use the words interchangeably. Sometimes the buyer will say, okay, you can give them a stay bonus. Now, the client I was just telling you about, he's not selling for years. So he's putting this in place for one reason, is that he attended another lecture that we did about retaining employees. And he was like, you know what? I don't want anyone else to tell me what I can and can't do. So if I put it in place now, no one has no say about it. They'll be in place for 3 to 5 years before I even look to sell my company. And that's it. So he made that decision early. If you don't have it in place by the time you identify a buyer, you do talk to the buyer. So a buyer might say, okay, if you're going to put these in place, stay bonuses, A, how much are they? And B, I want you to put in place that not only for that money do they have to stay until closing, but they also have to stay for at least 6 months post-closing. That way the buyer has comfort knowing that your CFO isn't going to walk out the door the day after closing, leaving the buyer with no one who knows how to run the finances of the company, or nobody who knows the intricate details of the company. So, like I said, all of these need to be discussed with the buyer. A lot of times, I keep using the CFO as an example because that's literally the person that you need as you're closing, as you're getting ready to close, as you're doing due diligence. There is so much financial diligence that's done. If you've never sold a business before, when you find a buyer, you give them, a profit loss statement, maybe a balance sheet. Like, it seems like, oh, wow, this is nothing, right? Once you have an LOI signed and you're into the real due diligence, the financial aspects, they will know everything about your business. They will have gone through your bank accounts, your invoices, how you collect everything. So your CFO is very important when you're selling. So that's why I use them as an example. If you have a manager, CEO that's not yourself, that person's just as important. So you would want to make sure that they stay on board. It also, like I keep saying, it is a tangible recognition. I have a client now who sold their business and it didn't go well. So I didn't represent them on the sale, but I'm representing her afterwards. She doesn't want to use the same lawyer. And part of the issue is that she didn't tell any of her employees. The lawyer advised her, don't tell any of your employees until after the sale's final. She gave none of her employees, not only did she not give them a heads up, but she didn't give any of them any type of bonus or any type of recognition from the sale. And what happened was they were so angry that some of them worked for her for over 20 years. And she, definitely got the wrong advice, but it caused problems afterwards, because then when the buyer is asking these employees, where's XYZ, the employees weren't on her side. So they caused some friction with respect to some of the representations and warranties that you make as a seller selling your business. You make certain representations and warranties about your business. And the last thing you want is your employees after the sale saying that what you promised wasn't true. Now, they will not know that you made a promise. They won't know the exact promise that you made. But if you've made a promise that there's at least, XYZ amount of business per week, and the buyer believes that, then after the closing, they go to one of your employees and say, is there XYZ? That person is going to be more apt just to answer it in a bad manner, in a defeatist manner, not on your side manner. So, I had one client who sold in addition, so that's why you want to think about all these bonuses to keep people on. But yet at the same time, I had another client who sold a business, gave an employee, it was over $2 million of a stay bonus. And right after the closing, he thought that that wasn't enough. And right after the closing, he went to the buyer and said, oh, by the way, this gigantic contract, the customer told us before closing that they were going to cancel it, and he didn't tell you. So now my client on that end is did not get his earnouts, and there was a whole litigation about the earnouts because of a breach of a representation. So it's very important that you give the proper bonuses to the proper people, and you think about all of these things. Tangible recognition, people want that. Who has been with you for a long time and feels that they own the company, who feels that they should own the company, who feels that they did as much work as you. You have to identify those people, because whether they're right or wrong, their feelings are going to matter in this whole process. And employees are your business. There's very few businesses that the employees won't matter to the buyer. So, like I said, go ahead.
Can I ask a question about that story? Was it actually a misrepresentation?
So I will say that the information that the employee had and gave to the buyer supported the buyer's claim that it was a misrepresentation. And you know what? He should have given it to he should have given it to the client, the seller, before before the sale took place, or should have reminded the seller, don't forget about this. Make sure you tell the buyer. He was involved in very intricately in the sale. So, you look back on you learn things, but you say, what is it that the client did, the seller did, that somehow didn't make him feel important enough that as soon as the sale was over, he went to the buyer to tell the buyer. So this particular employee was smart enough to know that there was an earnout. He knew there was an earnout, and he knew that it would affect the seller. And the only thing I could say is it had to be retribution for something, right? So that's why it's very important. You got to know your employees and take care of them when you're selling a company. Could I tell you exactly what the seller did wrong that made the employee do that? I can't, because I know his bonus was $2 million, which is nothing.
But the seller didn't know. The seller wasn't intentionally hiding this from the buyer.
So I'm going to say no, but the employee showed the buyer an email that put that into question for the buyer, and the buyer full force came after the seller. And it was in litigation for a couple of years before it finally settled. And if you have to go to litigation, that's money. And if you have to settle, that means you're not getting everything that you want. A settlement, neither side's happy, right? So you're losing out on some of the value of your business by having an employee who either wasn't loyal to you at the beginning or isn't loyal to you afterwards. So it's important. The woman that I told you about earlier who contacted me after she sold the company, and the buyer was having problems with her employees, she was very upset. She was upset that none of her employees gave her a party afterwards. And I said, but you didn't tell them. You didn't tell anybody. I don't know where the lawyer that you were using was coming from, but there's literally almost no circumstance where you're not going to tell anyone that you've been working with for 20 or more years that you're selling until after it's done. Just not the way you do it. So it's very important that you think about bonuses. So sales, sale bonuses, which means the bonus that automatically occurs when you sell. You want to look to long-term loyal employees. You can't give it to everyone, because if someone's only been there for a couple of weeks, why would they get a sale bonus? If someone's been there, a couple of months, why would they get a sales bonus? So you want to look at long-term employees as a reward for their value to the company. It's very rare that every employee would get a sale bonus. When I talked earlier about that manufacturing company and they gave it to every employee, they literally, I think there was only out of 150 employees, there was 2 employees who had been there for just a few months. Everyone else really was a long time. And they were like, what are we going to do? Leave 2 people out? We're going to give them a smaller bonus. So it was fine. You want to think, how do I set an amount of the sale bonus? A lot of times people do a percentage of cash at closing, 1%, 0.5%. Customarily, usually, and I'm going to say usually, it's not, if you've sold a company and not done this, that's fine. But usually on the bigger deals, the measure is between 10 and 20% of the sales proceeds will be split by all employees. So it does, if you have a smaller company, it would be 10% maybe. If you have if you have a larger company, you might need to go to 20% to make the bonuses worth it for everybody. The more people, the higher the percentage should be. At the same time, you want to keep your sales price confidential with only a limited number of people knowing. So we can word it. If you determine how much you want to give them, 20% of the purchase price, then we figure out the number, and then we can work it out where none of the employees actually know the number of your sale. When you're selling your company, there's non-disclosure agreements between yourself and the buyer that the certain things remain confidential, will never be made public. Purchase price is always one of them. So you don't want to give all your employees a way to calculate what your purchase price was. And then, so it goes from key people, how long they've been there, and how much of your business's growth and development was a result of your employee efforts. The manufacturing client that I told you about, when they gave a bonus to everyone, it's now about 3 years post-closing. The buyer didn't lose any employee, none. They all stayed, and they're doing well. So it really paid off for them to do it for the seller to have done that, to help the buyer stay happy.
Who pays this 10 to 20%?
So Most of the time, 99.9% of the time, it's the seller, because
So,
it's the seller recognizing that, okay, I'm making this much money, but I have to recognize the people that have worked for me. Once in a while, it's not very often, the buyer will contribute some towards towards these bonuses, but usually that's if it's going to be a retention bonus. So you have to stay on, and then you have to stay on for 6 months after the closing. So that the additional amount that they would get after closing for the 6 months would be from the buyer, but not always. Sometimes, depending on how much your earnout is, the buyer might say, I'm not, make sure they stay on for a year, and you're the one making the extra money from them, so I'm not going to pay the retention bonus. You have to pay it. And I have clients who have done that.
okay.
So literally, they paid the bonus to the employee for staying with the new employer, the buyer, for 6 months or a year. I've never seen it never more than a year. Usually it's about 6 months.
Now, how does the tax treatment work if it's paid by the company? If you find a way to somehow have it be paid by the company, it probably counts as an expense to the
Um,
company. If the seller gets the money first, they're paying taxes and then paying this out afterwards.
cor-
Uh,
well, if so, it's always going to be wages to the employee. So you're always going to
okay,
take, you're never going to give it. So it's always going to be paid as wages. You can take out all taxes. And I'm not a tax attorney, but the way I've done it with clients is it doesn't matter, because if the seller gets it in, it's a dollar for dollar expense that comes off. So he's not really paying taxes on that full amount, because it's an actual expense of the business that comes off income for the year. So if
but
I pay you $200 for your company and you have to pay your employees $100, that's going to be, the $100 is going to be an expense off the income of the $200. So it depends
okay,
on, it more affects, but it does affect, you definitely need your tax advisors involved in all of this to help set it up. But usually with this, it's the tax implication sometimes is for the employees. They'll talk about it. Can you not pay it all to me to this year? I want some of it this year, some of it next year, even though I earned it this year. So so sometimes we
right.
do work with the employees to give them the best tax benefit.
Yeah, my mom's company was, I don't know if they closed, but they were in the process of selling. And she was telling me, she's like, if they close this before the end of the year, I'm going to have this big tax thing.
Yeah. I had a deal this year. Usually every year I have a deal that we saw that occurs in December. We sign, but it's not effective till January. So the payments are made till January. Because if you run your business all year, right, you have your income from your business all year. And then it's December, you're going to sell. And then if you add that purchase price onto your income for the year, it blows your taxes away. I closed a deal at the beginning of January where we literally had everything signed right before Christmas, but the closing itself didn't take place till January, because the client and his tax advisors figured out, okay, I'm going to get this now income from selling my company, but in actuality, I'm not going to pay any taxes on that money until the middle of 2025 when I do my taxes for 2024. So everything is, you work with your tax advisors to make it best for you. And sometimes on these bonuses, you do have to work with your tax advisors and your employees' tax advisors. For you, for the seller of a business, you're getting your money in is usually going to be capital gains, because subject to capital gains, which is a less tax rate than ordinary income, but not all of it. So you have to try to figure it out how it can be worked so that you are getting tax advantage to even paying the bonuses. It's a very good question.
Thank you. Good answer.
And like I said, the very sophisticated employees, the ones that get in the higher bonuses, might very well say that, okay, well, we're closing in November. I don't want my bonus in this year. I want it paid next year. So we'll sign an agreement that says that I'm getting it in January. Sometimes the accountants come back and say, oh, but they earned it in 2024 and we have to report it then. So you work it out with language in the contracts to make it good for everybody. So you just want to, sometimes you do a combination of some, like we said, sometimes a stay bonus until the closing and then a retention bonus afterwards. Sometimes I've seen in deals where the buyer doesn't want you to do the retention bonus agreement. They want to do the retention bonus agreement with your employee. So it depends on how involved the buyer wants to be. You want to, like we talked about very quick, you want to avoid bonuses that are too high because you don't want to disincentivize your employees from staying with the buyer. You want to strike a balance and align. And like we've been talking about, you are going to negotiate as the seller with the buyer as to see if you can get them to pay any of the bonuses. So that does come out of your sale price. And I think that covers it for me. Does anyone have any questions? I see this.
We had 18 people watching this on LinkedIn.
Does anyone have any questions? I don't know how we get questions from LinkedIn.
I don't know. I'm looking at LinkedIn, pulling it up in case now it says there's 15. In case there's any questions there. Anyone here? Anyone on Zoom have any questions?
Okay.
Maybe they had all the same questions I had.
Well, it's very important to think about this before you are sending before you decide to sell your business. Even if you don't act on it right away, at least start thinking about it. Who would I need and what would I be willing to give them to make sure my deal works out well? And there are just so many instances of it going very well for a seller who makes sure they align everything, and going very bad for people who don't align with their key employees.
Yeah. Let me say one quick anecdote. My mother's company, she worked at a technology company. She was there from when they founded in the 1990s. At one point, they had a sister company that they merged with, and now they were the owners of the whole thing were selling. And there was a revolt of the employees at one point during the sale. And they then came back and negotiated a major, I don't know, sale bonus. So they really misestimated. I don't remember what the details were, but I was involved. But and it,
Well,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
They needed the people. I mean, in their company,
Right.
it wasn't the executives that were the value. And salespeople maybe, but they needed the people to do the work. It was
Right.
they wrote code.
Right. So now they did the right thing, but the employees had to force them to do the right thing. And now the employees aren't as loyal to the seller as you would want them to be going forward.
Right.
So, it is important. And depending on who you are and what your business is, it might be more important. It might not be as important. But it's, to me, your employees, you can't do anything without your employees, right? You could be the best business person in the world, running the best business in the world. If you don't have people to do the work that you need done, your business isn't worth anything. And that's just what businesses have to think about and prepare for.
Right. All right. So we're coming up on the end. I have one more question, but I'll just say we have this end of meeting poll. If people who are here could answer, that would be helpful. Appreciate it. And I have one more question. I was speaking with someone running a company that was doing close to $1 billion in revenue. They had maybe 500 employees, and they were essentially a staffing agency for low-paid workers. Let's say they were staffing janitorial staff at hospitals, I'm around, whatever. Would they be paying stay bonuses to, and they also told me they don't believe in people who went to college. That was like their introduction to this conversation. So, and then they called back like a month or two later and said, oh, we're getting purchase offers. Maybe we should have a conversation. But anyway, would they be paying stay bonuses to those 20,000 people? Is that something that happens, or
Right.
this is more for like smaller
right
businesses?
So that is that business, what you're telling me is that business may have a small amount of employees, but they rely on their 20,000 independent contractors or their group of 20,000 that they need to run their business. If they don't have those people, they don't have a business, right?
Correct. And
Right.
they're probably all W-2, but I'm saying just think of
Right.
it. In corporate, you've got
Right.
500 people, essentially support staff,
Right.
legal, finance, scheduling, whatever.
Right.
And then
so I have a client who does that type of business, but for nurses. So nurses that can cover in ERs or doctor's offices, you know, on a day, 2 days, whatever. And what they did is they know that at some point they're going to sell. So when we were doing their contractor agreement with these people, we built in that we could assign their contract to work with us. Now they could terminate it at any time, but we said to them, we can assign the contract. And if we assign the contract and you stay on with the party to whom we've assigned your contract and do X amount of hours worth of work within a year, you will be entitled to, I think it was a $10,000 payment. So to incentivize, like they didn't even notice it in the contract. Nobody was saying, are you selling? They weren't paying attention. Like, oh yeah, I get a bonus if you sign my contract, no big deal. But that's why it's in there. So that when we sell, we know that our business isn't just how we run it and our computer systems. That's all very important. They need I can't remember how many nurses they have like on call, literally on call, like I think it was upwards of like 2,000 nurses, which is a lot. And apparently, you know, I'm not in the medical field, but apparently that's very important. There's doctors' offices, hospitals that need covering last minute all the time. So our client knows that if they don't have those nurses to send out, their business isn't worth anything. So yes, you can give bonuses and think about independent contractors or lower level employees that your business isn't worth anything without them. So yes, very good question.
All right. Bob has his hand raised. Do you have a question, Bob?
Then we'll wind down. More of a statement. Christine, this is a wonderful presentation, really extremely well done. And I just wanted to underscore you mentioned it, but the importance of having those employee meetings, doing the comparison of benefits, holding their hands through the transition of change. Change is scary. I have a client of mine who I ended up firing before they completed their acquisition because the buyer refused to spend any money or any time on that. And ultimately, I had to walk away from the engagement because, you know, nothing I was advising was being listened to. They closed the deal. They lost at least 20% of their employees because they walked in and said, here we are, here's your new handbook. And that was it, you know, and you need those people to run the business. So anyway, I just wanted to underscore it. Real life, it happens. People walk out the door, but tremendous presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you have my contact information, if anyone has any questions.
All right. Thank you, Christine. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. Thank you to everyone here. Thank you to everyone on LinkedIn, and stay in touch.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.